Hello students, welcome to the Analyst dated 11th of November 2023. Today we look at 5 important articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. The first article will be regarding how rain brought respite to the Delhi NCR region pertaining to the air pollution. Then we look at vocal for local. Then we'll understand the correlation between paddy and stubble burning and thereof the correlation with air pollution. Then we look at border roads organization, and finally we'll understand what is a Baler Machine. The first article is regarding rain bringing respite to the Delhi NCR region, and this pertains to the air pollution, which has been deteriorating to the range of 450 to 500 in the month of November. Now, there are several reasons to this, but the Supreme Court has lamented that despite policies like odd even, going for GRAP, going for phasing out of old diesel vehicles, then going for BS6. So multiple policies including creation of Eastern Peripheral Expressway, Western Peripheral Expressway to divert the traffic away from Delhi. So this has not been working. Why? Because again in the month of November, the situation is same. Now we must appreciate the geography of Delhi NCR region, and this region is a continuous airshed. It is a connected system. So if some pollutant is being added from Ghaziabad, or let's say something is added in Bhiwani, then naturally it will affect Delhi. Why? Because it is a connected system. So the air is connected here, right? That being said, we must appreciate that we are living in an urban area, and in an urban area, it is natural to see temperature inversion. And if there is temperature inversion, what happens is that there is lack of vertical mixing of air. And if there is lack of vertical mixing of air, then what will happen? The air would keep on cycling inside rather than escaping. So that happens with the pollutants as well. The pollutants will also not escape the region. So slow wind speed or low wind speed and lack of vertical mixing will lead to cycling of the same pollutants. Simultaneously, in November, what happens is that we have to go for the next season. We have to sow the next seeds and we have to harvest paddy. Now, after harvesting paddy through combines, what happens is a part of paddy is left, which is called stubble, in the ground, and this is hardy. So rather than taking it out, which is a tedious and expensive process in terms of labor, so what farmers do, they would burn this, and this is called your stubble burning. And due to this stubble burning, what happens is that this paddy shoot that is left, this will add a lot of particulate matter. Now, given this particulate matter is added in the air shed, it will naturally affect the Delhi region in terms of its air quality, and it will create several impacts. Now, at this moment, we must also appreciate that, let's say this is a box and this is the air shed of Delhi NCR. So now what is happening? There is too much of particulate matter. If there is too much of particulate matter, then the same particulate matter can also act as condensation nuclei and aid in precipitation. And that is why the excessive amount of particulate matter which was released in the atmosphere in this Delhi NCR airshed, it led to the recent precipitation for a day and a half. Then we also see phenomena like haze. Now what do we mean by haze? So it is essentially atmospheric pollution, which takes place when fine particulate matter is added to the air, which affects its visibility. Now, what are the sources? So there are natural sources like wildfire, dust storms, volcanic eruptions, and there are anthropogenic sources like fossil fuel burning, burning of coal, oil, gas, etc., but most importantly, agricultural residue burning. So in our case, in the case of Delhi NCR, we are looking at haze because of stubble burning. Then we also see phenomena like smog. Now, what do we mean by smog? So whenever smoke is combined with fog, and whenever we are talking about fog, it is nothing but condensation. So let's say water vapor is rising up. As it is rising up, it is adiabatically cooling. As it cools down, it condenses. As it condenses, it forms your clouds. Now, cloud formation happens at a height. What if the condensation happens near the surface of earth? Then we see fog formation. So if the condensation is nearby the earth's surface, then it creates fog. And if fog mixes with smoke, then it creates smog. So smog would usually happen when? During winters. And just now we saw what? Haze. Haze happened because of what? Because of stubble burning, because of high amount of particulate matter. Now, smoke has multiple sources and they can be natural, they can be anthropogenic. And what are the common ailments? So the common ailments will be car emissions, will be industrial pollutants, will be power plants, etc. Then we have sulfurous smog. Here the concentration of sulfur oxides increases, and therefore if there is any amount of precipitation here, then it will lead to acid rain. And then we have the complex phenomena of photochemical smog. Now we must appreciate that photochemical smog and smog are two different things. Whenever we are talking about photochemical smog, we are essentially talking about winter smog. And in winter smog, what happens is that three constituents, that is volatile organic compounds, along with NOx, along with sunlight, they react to create O3 or ozone. And mind you, ozone is very essential to protect us from UV rays. But if it is present in stratosphere, it is good ozone. If it is present in troposphere, it is harmful. And so this complex process of creation of photochemical smog, it creates harmful ozone. And these are the phenomena that are usually seen in Delhi. So in summers we will see photochemical smog. In winters, before winters, we will see haze. Then in winter we will see fog and smog. And in summers we will see photochemical smog. So these are the phenomena that we usually see, and except for fog, majority of them are related to the air pollution issue of Delhi. Now, what are the impacts? So naturally it will affect the visibility, and therefore it will lead to logistic delays in terms of road, rail, aviation. Then it will create respiratory problems. So particularly for elderly, for children, for any vulnerable section who are suffering from comorbidities, let's say diabetes patients, let's say people suffering from cardiovascular diseases. Then the air pollution also impacts our hearts. So it leads to cardiovascular problems and increased risk of heart diseases, stroke and other problems. Then naturally, whenever there is pollution, the pollution is affecting humans. If it is affecting humans, humans being part of the biodiversity, it will naturally affect animals also, and it will naturally affect the plants also. So it will affect the productivity of the entire ecosystem. And today, what is the primary cause of air pollution? Now, majority of the air pollution today is not natural. It is anthropogenic, And in this particular case, what is the prime criteria? It is agriculture, that is stubble burning. So our own practices are now harming our own hearts. Then it is also affecting and it is again feeding climate change. So climate change is leading to extreme climate events which are triggering more intense and more frequent events like, let's say, smog, or let's say photochemical smog, or let's say temperature inversions. So more anomalies in the atmosphere, in the overall climate of a region. So this will in turn lead to further changes in the heat budget. So if there is, let's say, in a air shed, let's say there is a layer of gas, can this layer of gas affect the circulation of heat from sun? Naturally it can. So if extreme climate events are being triggered from climate change, which are triggering these intense disasters and more variable disasters, which are again affecting the heat balance, and therefore they are feeding into each other. Therefore, they are leading to furthermore climate change. Let's look at the second article, that is vocal for local. Now, the Prime Minister has urged all Indians to go for buying local, to promote the domestic industries and to promote the domestic entrepreneurs on the occasion of Diwali and the Dhanteras shopping. Now, to look at the economics of, let's say, Dhanteras, approximately last year on Dhanteras, India did 50,000 crores of business in a single day. Now, let's understand what is the need for such vocal for local push. So, the issue of predatory pricing. So, let's say today a company like Amazon enters India. Let's say we have 3 to 4 Amazons who have entered India. Now, at the first, they have deep pockets. So, they will go for deep discounting. Once they have deep pockets, they are going for deep discounting. They are going for customer acquisition. Once the customers are acquired, then they would become the monopolistic player. And if they become the monopolies in a particular sector or a particular segment, then they have the power to control the price. And so, using various predatory pricing methods, they are cutting on their competition. And globally, they have been, particularly the e-commerce giants and the Mang companies, the big tech, they have been called out for anti-competitive practices and for abuse of dominance. And they have been fined heavily for breach of data, from abuse of dominance in Europe. Now, simultaneously, what do we see is that there is crony capitalism. So, by bribing, let's say, few key players will be able to control a particular industry. Let's say 3 players are controlling a particular industry. This leaves very little room for, let's say, a domestic manufacturer to enter, or let's say a domestic startup to enter. And that has happened with multiple countries when it comes to telecom, that global companies have entered the market and then they have become the sole supplier of not only the towers, not only the internet services, but also equipments. So all equipments now being sourced through different companies of China, and that has happened in many countries of Africa. So through crony capitalism, what will happen is that a complex web of companies, politicians, they will somehow dominate the industry. And this industry will then be shielded for any entry. That means entry barriers will be created in this industry for even domestic players. And this has typically happened in oil markets also. So usually the usual suspects like British Petroleum or let's say Shell Oil, they will enter a country, then they will go for exploration. Once they go for exploration, they will claim the rights and then they will set up refineries or they will start shipping out their crude and they will earn in billions and then they will share very little royalty with the country from where they are getting the resources. That also happens in other industries. So crony capitalism can lead to hijacking of entire industrial setups. Then nascent industrial capacity. In many of industrial sectors, what we see is that there is a lot of growth opportunity. Then there is lack of tech. There is need of high capital. So what would happen is that a dominant player would try to enter this entire market because it knows that, let's say, because of nascent development, there is no tech available in the country. Then there is lack of any financial institution which is able to lend such heavy capital, let's say $6 to $8 billion. Classic example is the semiconductor industry, but the growth potential is very high. So what they will do is they will again create entry barriers. Then shallow capital markets. So I cannot get long gestation funds. I cannot get funds for let's say 20 years, 30 years at cheaper interest rates. Instead, my foreign loans are cheaper than going for coercive capital. So let's say I am using my capital today to become an angel investor. But instead of being an angel investor, I become a demon investor. And I start coercing the board into decisions that ethically or through business means that the entire company does not want to take up. And we have seen that after pumping in billions of dollars, what a lot of investors would do would simply remove the competition or to simply remove the founders or the innovators who created these companies. So therefore, there must be some shielding of domestic companies, of domestic manufacturing, of domestic talent. Why? Because this is a common phenomena which is happening all across the world whenever we see that people who are working in technology. So we never see that the top CEOs or the top innovators, they are being removed from their own startups or they are asked for retirement once the investment is being made. But that happens more often in countries like India. So we would see that the Bansal brothers would leave Flipkart once Walmart enters Flipkart. So that is what happens through coercion. Then the monopolistic tendencies, which are through, let's say, complex taxation, rules, company layering. So I am creating a web of companies and these companies are contracting with each other, having related party transactions. So due to this, what is happening is that there is chances of deindustrialization. And this is the best example that Pakistan is unable to print passports over shortage of lamination. Now, what did we see during the COVID times? We see that the world was dependent on China and China abused its position. It abused its position as a dominant supplier of, let's say, manufactured goods. Along with it, it also started using, let's say, energy, critical minerals, rare earth minerals in every sector, or let's say in some metals. So wherever it could, it started abusing its dominant position in the global supply chain. Now, what we have seen is that let's say some top companies, they want to decrease their cost of production. So they start shipping to a cheaper country where labor is cheaper, let's say China. Now, will it not lead to deindustrialization in these regions? Will your iron belt not become your rust bowl? And has it not happened with US? Has it not lost the manufacturing jobs? Or can I say that the consumption of US has supported the manufacturing of China? So rather than building and consuming, now what US is doing, it is only consuming while the manufacturing is being done in China. So what is happening? The flight of capital, the flight of technology, the flight of know-how, the sharing of technology, and then leading to reverse engineering, the sharing of therefore dual use technologies also. And then can China then kick out US? Yes, it can, through abuse of dominance. Whenever there is a crisis, it will abuse its dominant position. So then there is unfair distribution of dividends. So whenever we look at the impact of globalization, we see that fewer countries have got higher dividends while the rest have not been shared. And simultaneously, if we see that only few regions, even within country, they develop or they get dividends out of globalization. And we can see this with an example. Let's say urban area versus rural area. And where would the FDI come? Where would the international brands come? And therefore, where would the jobs be created? So, naturally, the capital comes with opportunity, and capital is more attracted to regions which already have a growth inertia or developmental inertia. Then, we also must see that India wishes to increase its own size from, let's say, $3 trillion to $10 trillion and to eventually become the single biggest economy of the world. That is our growth aspiration. To have that aspiration, we must also become the industry of the world, the factory of the world. So we must manufacture for India and for the world. So to have that, we need a higher share in terms of, let's say, trade of both goods as well as services, as well as a higher share in terms of the global manufacturing. So India is also ambitious about its own job creation, about its own capital creation, about its own company creation, entrepreneurship, and that too locally. Now, what do we mean by vocal for local? So it is essentially part, or can I say a succession of successive policies that we have seen. Make in India, then we have seen Atmanirbhar Bharat, and simultaneously we are looking at production linked incentives, and we are looking at vocal for local. So India should not be only seen as a country which is a consumer, or if it becomes a manufacturer, then with poor quality. So those tags should be changing. So rather than becoming a single consumer, it should become a producer and a consumer and a exporter. And rather than poor quality, we should be known by zero effect and zero defect. We should aim for Six Sigma in terms of quality control in our manufacturing practices. So it is to manufacture what we can manufacture domestically. So we should not import, let's say, our idols, toys, belts, shirts, These are not complex things to manufacture domestically. And more importantly, their domestic manufacturing will give me jobs. And these jobs will help in alleviation of all social issues that we face, including poverty, including hunger. So, if we are looking to become one of the largest economies of the world, we must also look at sharing the benefits of that growth through becoming vocal for local. And here we are looking for more competitiveness with the globe. That means we are going for better safety, quality, competitiveness, as well as promoting job creation and promoting entrepreneurship. And it is not simply replacement of, or it is not simply import substitution. Let's look at the third article, that is Paddy and Stubble. Now, this is in purview that stubble burning is leading to increased air pollution and deteriorating air quality index in the region, and how agricultural practices of removal or replacement or reduction of paddy can improve this air quality index over the period of time. Now, let's understand about paddy. So, we are essentially talking about rice, and this is a water guzzler. And usually, what do we see is it is usually grown in the eastern regions of India. And if we look at the eastern regions, what do we see? That this region is being affected by southwest monsoon as well as tropical cyclones. So, what do we see? That these regions are usually moist to wet. That means more than 150 centimeters of rain. And we know that paddy has been traditionally grown in a labor intensive manner using back breaking work. Why? Because there is high population density and it is providing food to this entire region, and therefore it becomes the staple crop also. Then it is possible to have flood irrigation. Why? Because it is a moist region. Also, we have to see that it is more about it is more about sustenance of the entire family. So it is about the food security of the family whenever we are looking at the eastern regions of India, which are more moist. Now, what is happening is that when we are going for green revolution, we were looking at the northwestern regions of India as the wheat heartland of India. Now, the wheat heartland of India also have the benefit of canals and the benefits of, let's say, free electricity, or can I say subsidized electricity, subsidized pumps, and simultaneously with the supply chain of wheat which was created during the green revolution, also have the MSP regime, and we also have a very good farm gate infrastructure. So the supply chain is extremely well made. So over the period of time, what has happened is that the wheat heartland region of India, they have started taking up wheat along with rice. And here we are talking about, let's say, basmati rice, which are yielding good dividends. Why? Because it is export grade. So better dividends. Now, the only issue is that this region is not wet, and therefore it requires more water. And being a water guzzling crop and being in a agricultural setup which promotes calorie centric, food crop centric, and cereal centric agriculture. Why do we promote all of this? Because we went for food security first. We were aiming for food security first. So we wanted cereals, we wanted calories first. So in this setup, the institutional setup supports both paddy cultivation as well as wheat cultivation. But the ecology does not support the cultivation of paddy in the northwestern regions of India. Why? Because it lacks moisture. And where will we get the water? Apart from, let's say, monsoon. So we'll get it from groundwater. So it is leading to groundwater depletion. Now, simultaneously, this paddy will also create our air pollution crisis. So what are the solutions? So we have to move away from water guzzlers and we have to take up agroecological solutions. That means we have to take up crops which are suitable to a particular region as well as the ecology. And we cannot ignore the ecology anymore. Then we have to diversify from, let's say, crop. So I'm taking some crops and I'm also going for some non-crop incomes. Like, let's say, I am going for some trees. That is, I am also going for, let's say, some cattle. So I'm mixing various types of farming, or I am mixing farming with other incomes. So farm plus non-farm. So the idea is that if I have mixed incomes and I'm not solely dependent on my crop centric incomes, then I tend to have more options. Right now, if I am dependent on two crops, I have sources of income as wheat and rice, then what would happen? It will build a core dependency on rice and then it will become very difficult to replace it or to modify it. Then we have to go for soil health rejuvenation. Now, over the period of time, what we have seen is that intensive application of fertilizers, pesticides, and other inputs simultaneously with flood irrigation, which are again pumped by, let's say, free electricity and free pumps, that has led to soil exhaustion. And this soil exhaustion has been coming. This is visible in the shape that over the period of time we are seeing decline. So if I keep the input cost constant, then we would see a decline in the total production. On the other hand, let's say I want to maintain the same output level, then my cost of agriculture is increasing over the period of time. And this is happening, and therefore it becomes essential to go for doubling farming income. Why? Because this is causing the real agrarian distress. Then we can also create a market for this stubble, and by going for compressed biogas, bioethanol, biomass power plants, as well as compact bale market. Now, if we go for compact bale market, the compact bale market can directly be supplied to all these plants. So bales are nothing but, let's say, this is our residue. So if we roll this into, let's say, cylindrical bales, or let's say squared bricks, so these bricks can then be compressed and then can be supplied to industries. Then we have to take off innovative methods like going for different seeds. For example, short duration rice, which is built by Pusa. Then adopting polluter pay principle and going for clear execution, strict execution of in terms of stubble burning. Then we also have to finally rationalize our water subsidies, and we have to look at metering water. or at least decreasing the amount of water that is supplied or the duration of water that is supplied. Why? Because it directly affects our water table and it directly affects our ecology as well. Let's look at the border roads organization. Now, it helps India to develop roads, bridges and airfields in hostile environment, which are usually not liked by private sector, and usually they will be in regions which are either hostile in terms of the environment, the climate, or it is hostile. Why? Because there is a neighbor and it is very difficult to build the roads in these hostile territories. Let's say Lahul, let's say Spiti, let's say Leh, Ladakh. So all these regions, the border road organization will be extremely prominent. Then there are security concerns, there are environmental challenges, and a majority of the roads are developed all along the Indo-China border. They are developed by the Border Roads Organization. The BRO also helps in clearing these roads and maintaining these roads and also connecting the last villages of India. Then they are also helping or supporting our neighbors like Afghanistan, Bhutan, Myanmar, Tajikistan and Sri Lanka, and they also ensure a smooth supply chain for the Indian armed forces. Now the officers and personnel are derived from General Reserve Engineer Force from the parent cadre of the BRO, and it is also staffed by officers and troops drawn from the Indian Army's Corps of Engineer, and BRO is also included in the order of battle of armed forces, ensuring their support at any time. Let's look at Baler Machine. Now, whenever we are going for rice cultivation, we are left with stubble. Now, this stubble can be managed in two ways. One is in situ. That is, let's say I am going for its management in the field itself. So let's say I am using it as a mulching agent, or I am cutting it, shredding it and mixing it in the soil so as to add some organic value in the soil itself. So that is in situ management, and that is being done by, let's say, happy seeders or super seeders, and they are being extremely subsidized by state governments and they are being promoted in the regions adjoining Delhi NCR so that the stubble burning is curtailed. Simultaneously, there is ex situ management also. Now here what happens is Baler machines are used. So ex situ means that I will move this entire stubble away in the form of these bales. I will roll them into these bales, and these bales can be used in their own bale economy in the form of, let's say, power plants, let's say in creating of some starch based products, or let's say bioethanol, or let's say it can be used in some other industry as inputs. So that is the ex situ management. So Baler machine is an alternative method or alternative way of going for solution of stubble burning. So these two become extremely important for your prelims. The happy seeders, super seeders, which can be important for in situ management, and Baler machines, which can be important for ex situ management of stubble. Thank you so much. I hope it helped.